Hi everyone, and welcome again to another lecture of literature. Today we'll try to tackle another important element of fiction. I mean the point of view. The point of view. Now we're going to tackle and highlight this element, alright, through answering the question how. Because when we ask the question how, I'm going to find this element. Now how what? How represents how the events of the story are narrated. Clear? Are narrated. That's why when we say the point of view, we mean the angle from which, right, the series of events and the actions of the story are narrated and recounted. Or simply, okay, who is the narrator of the story? Who is the narrator of the story events? So we can say point of view or narrator, or also mode of narration, or also the narrative, what we call the narrative perspective. So all these terms in literature indicate one thing, which is the point of view. It means how the events and the actions, okay, in the story are narrated and are told and recounted. Of course, we have different types of point of view, and writers also tend to use different types of narrators. Today we'll try to shed light on the main, right, and the commonest, main important, and the commonest types of point of view. Right. Now, when we talk about point of view, of course, the first and the major type we tend to mention here is the first person narrator. The first person narrator. Here we have a participating character in the novel, right, who tells us, who narrates to us, right, the different events of the story. So we are going to be introduced to the story, right, through this character in the story who uses the first person pronoun I. He uses I. Alright. So this character is going to introduce to us the events of the story and even the other characters and even the setting of the story. So I'm going to follow him. He will lead us and guide us in the story. We see only what he sees and we know only what he knows. It means here we are limited to the scope of this character. Right, that's why we can't know anything unless he informs us about it. This is one of its shortcomings. Right, shortcomings. That's why writers tend sometimes to compensate for this weakness, right, of this type by using, okay, dialogue and conversation between the other characters to tell the reader about those events or incidents which happen far from, okay, this narrator or participating character who uses the I. Alright, so the first type is called, number one, first person narrator. Clear? First person narrator who uses usually I, and here it's called the first person singular narrator, and sometimes he uses also we, and it's called first person plural narrator. Right, but very often, okay, writers tend to implement, right, a character who uses I, right, to narrate the story events. In fact, when we say I here of the narrator, we must be very careful that this I represents the view of the narrator and not of the author necessarily. So there is a big difference between the author of the story and the narrator. When I say I, for example, in the character of a story, like, for example, David Copperfield, so here the I does not necessarily represent, right, Charles Dickens. So the author is something, the narrator is something else. Clear? Something else. So here we're going to be guided, okay, and be introduced to different events and characters that this character, okay, shows and leads to us. Good. Now, if you want to mention some examples about the use of the first person narrator, here we have to also distinguish between two types of characters, because sometimes this first person narrator who is a character in the novel, it can be sometimes a major character and other times a minor character. Clear? Major character or minor character. Now, let's take some examples about, or for the major character as the first person narrator. We can mention here the famous novel of Charles Dickens, David Copperfield, in which David himself, the protagonist, right, introduces the story from the beginning, okay, till the end of the novel. All right, of the novel. Also, we can mention the masterpiece of G.D. Salinger, right, which is The Catcher in the Rye. The Catcher in the Rye. When he starts and opens here, the narrator, he opens his novel by saying, if you really want to hear about it, the first thing you will probably want to know is where I was born. Where I was born. Here the I represents this, okay, major character who acts as a narrator, okay, of this story events. Clear? Of this story events. Good. So, okay, as a minor character, we have many examples. For example, we can mention the example of, I don't know, The Great Gatsby. The Great Gatsby by Scott Fitzgerald, in which, right, we have the main character, right, who is Gatsby, but the narrator of the story is not Gatsby, he is Nick. He is Nick. And also we can mention the famous classical American masterpiece, Moby Dick, which is written by Herman Melville. Okay, Herman Melville, right, who also implemented, right, here a minor character in this novel to narrate, okay, the story events. In Moby Dick, we have the protagonist, or the major character is Captain Ahab, but, right, the real narrator, or the narrator, okay, opens the novel by saying, call me Ishmael. So Ishmael is the minor character who acts as a narrator to this story. Good. So this is concerning the first type or point of view, the first person narrator. And it is, as you see here, named after the use of the pronoun I. The first person pronoun I, okay, that's why it is named after it. The first person narrator, the first person pronoun I. Good. Now, a second also common type of point of view is the third person limited narrator. Third person limited narrator. Here also we have another participating character in the story, okay, who will introduce to us, right, we can say, the different scenes and events of the story are going to follow him, right? The author implements, okay, the third person limited, right, narrator, and he refers to him by she or he, either always she or always he, and sometimes you find always they, depends on the novel or on the story, but it is always one, okay, third person narrator, either he or she, right, not together. So here I'm going to follow also this third limited narrator who is referred to by he or she, right? He will guide us or she will guide us to the story events. Are going to be introduced, right, to the novel events, setting, okay, and so on, thanks to this narrator. However, here also we are limited to the scope of this, okay, third-person narrator. That's why it's called limited, right? Limited because we are limited to his scope of knowledge. We know only what he knows, and we see only what he sees, right? Only what he sees, and we don't know anything except, okay, if he tells us about it, right? About it, and also, as you see, the pronouns used here are either he or she, always, right? Sometimes they. That's why it's called third-person narrator. It means which uses the third-person pronoun he or she. Clear, or she. This was the type also is very common, right, and widely used by authors and writers. We can mention here the example of 1984, 1984 by George Orwell, right, George Orwell, and also the masterpiece of Ernest Hemingway, which is For Whom the Bell Tolls. Okay, For Whom the Bell Tolls. These two, okay, we find in them the use of a character, okay, which is referred to by he or she, right, and we are limited to its range of knowledge and its scope through the use of he or she. Also, another important and widely used also narrator is the third person omniscient narrator. Omniscient. Here we have, before this, let's summarize the second type. Number 2, it is third person. Third person, limited. It's called limited narrator, which is usually he or she, and sometimes they. Right, sometimes they. Also, I said the third type or point of view is called the third person omniscient. Third person omniscient narrator. What's omniscient? Omniscient is like a narrator who knows everything. Now, literally, it means what? Omniscient, it means all-knowing, all-seeing. All-knowing, all-seeing. That's why this type of third-person omniscient narrator is described as that godlike narrator. That godlike narrator, he is a neutral narrator, not one of the characters, of course, unlike the previous two types. Here, the narrator is not a character in the story, he is a neutral one, as if he is someone who is staying above, okay, the scene of actions and events, and he tells us about all what's going on, right, in this story, right. And this narrator also, he knows everything about the story and its atmosphere and its events, right. That's why he shifts from one character to another, from one place to another, right, as if he is a god who knows everything about this story and its events and its characters. He even tells us about the innermost thoughts, right, and also the feelings of the characters in the story, things we can't, okay, see by our eyes, but as a godlike narrator, he can tell us about all these, right, things and issues. Now, of course, this omniscient narrator, as he shifts from one place to another, one character to another, he uses here a mixture of pronouns. Sometimes, okay, together in the same story, together we find he, sometimes she, sometimes they, sometimes, okay, him, her, and so on. Clear? So all these pronouns are used to reflect, right, the, you can say, the wide and comprehensive range of knowledge of this godlike narrator, which is called the third person omniscient narrator. This one also is widely used among writers, especially Charles Dickens used it many times or very often. For example, we have the novel of Hard Times by Dickens. Right, it is here implemented this type. Also, we have Jane Austen's masterpiece Sense and Sensibility. Right, we have in which she used these. A mixture of pronouns and also this omniscient narrator. Alright, so we write here. Third one is third person omniscient. Omniscient means all-knowing, all-seeing narrator. Use mixture. Here it's she, the second one. She or he or they. Here it's all of them. She plus he, right, plus they, and so on. Clear? Plus. Together in the same story. Whereas second one, he used only one, the writer. Good. So these are the three main and the commonest, if we can say traditional, points of view which are used in literature since old times. Now, with the rise of modernism, in the modern time, especially since the beginning of the 20th century, also new modes of narration, have been invented, and have been implemented. Mainly, we have what we call the stream of consciousness. The stream of consciousness. Now, in this mode of narration, or in this type of point of view, we as readers are going to explore the inner or the stream of thoughts and feelings and ideas, which run within a character's mind. We are allowed as readers to learn about a character through, exploring directly, or being allowed to explore directly his stream and the flow of ideas and thoughts and, feelings, which occur at the level of his conscious mind, It's a kind of window opened, to us readers to read, what is, or those ideas and thoughts and feelings and sensations, which are circulating, within the characters or a character's conscious mind. That's why it's called the stream of consciousness. Here we have you can say, in this stream or flow of ideas and thoughts and so on, as if the character here he is talking to himself. He is talking or addressing himself. That's why, in a kind of, you can say, internal dialogue. That's why also it is called the interior monologue. So here, when the character is involved in that kind of dialogue or monologue with himself, when he exposes and passes and circulates, those ideas and thoughts and feelings and impressions he has in mind, we are going to explore them. They are exposed to us directly, thanks to the author who used this technique in his story, and we will, if you can say, reach easily and get access easily, to that conscious mind of the character and his ideas and thoughts. Here we can also say that it is a special technique used mainly, by modernist writers. In modernist literature, we can mention the example of Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, also, we can mention the famous example before her of Ulysses by James Joyce. So here, you know that also in modern times and after the rise of modernism in literature and in us in general, literature, if you can say, has witnessed a shift, okay, from being concerned with those sociological matters and issues, okay, to being more and more concerned with those psychological, right, and individual matters of the individual, right. So instead of being concerned with those sociological matters, problems, and realistic lifestyle of daily life, of struggles of the characters, in the modern times, with the advent of modernism, literature has become more and more concerned with the individual matters of the character. That's why here we tend to focus mainly on those personal, psychological, reflections or impressions on the individual himself, right? Individual himself, rather than those social, cultural, issues which are surrounding him, It is one of the effects of mainly, the rise of psychoanalysis after the introduction of Freud's theories, clear, and also because of that, more and more concentration on the individual as the major, focus and the major concern of arts in general, Go. Now, if you want to write here first, the fourth one, which is stream of consciousness. Right. Or what we call interior monologue. Right. Interior monologue. Also, we have many other types or modes of narration, but they are not very, very common as these four ones. For example, you can mention here the second, you can add here the second person narrator here. The writers implement a character who uses you. Right, addresses the reader, through the pronoun you. It's called second person narrator, but it's not widely used. It's only, if you can say, rare and scarce in the world of literature. That's why we haven't mentioned here or focused on it in this lecture. So, as you see here, we have these are the main important types of points of view that writers tend to use, write, and implement in order to narrate, the events of their stories. It's they represent, if you can say, the angle, from which the events of their stories are observed, and are recounted. If you want, just as a remark here about to differentiate between or to discover, what a story, uses as a point of view, or what type of point of view this or that story uses. Here you have to rely on your key clues, which are the pronouns. If the writer implements I, it is of course in the story first person narrator, or we also first person narrator. Here of course the I of the we is going to be one of the story characters. Also, if the writer uses she alone or only he alone along the story line, of the novel, for example, here also it's called third person limited narrator. Now, third case, when he uses mixture of, for example, here, mixture of pronouns, he and she and they at the same time. He shifts from he to she to they to them to that there to clear to her to his. Here it's called third person omniscient or godlike narrator Clear, godlike narrator. The last one, which is the stream of consciousness or interior monologue Clear, interior monologue. So all these are implemented and are used to convey and to can say narrate the story events of or in fiction What is left? I think that that's all for the time being for this lecture. Sometimes writers may use only one of these, one of these points of view in their stories, but other times also they can use mixture. For example, at the beginning, the novel or the story opens with I, then, we, and so on. All right, sometimes it depends here on each novel, and its structure, and its structure. All right, its structure. It's not always, example, one point of view from beginning to the end. Sometimes they may shift a little bit from major character to a minor character to, a third person narrator, and so on and so forth. So these are all what represents basically the types of the point of view on the narrator. Hoping that you have understood and grasped this element which represents the pillar. The pillar also, and very important corner of fiction, because it is the window through which we readers can learn about the story events. So thank you so much, and see you in another element, in another lecture. Take care.